So yeah, mythology is a really important aspect of knowing thyself and knowing where we come from. As Michael Caesarion says, if you cut a man off from his roots, you make him a slave. So, as you can see from the modern society, most people are completely cut off from their ancestors. Most of us only really know our family lineage going back to our grandparents or great grandparents. We might have a faint understanding of where we're from in terms of our lineage. Unless you're from a very prominent family that has a lot of documentation and historical records, it can be very difficult to go back more than 4 generations. So I think mythology is a really integral way to really connect with your ancestors without having to do this whole big genealogical research project and travel back to the country where you're from. For example, myself as an Aussie, a lot of us are mixed race from all different races and cultures that immigrated here over different times. So it's not just as cut and dry as saying, oh, I'm Dutch or I'm English or whatever. There's this whole mix. I know in my background I have, that I know of, French, Swedish, Norwegian, English, well, Cornish, English, Scottish, possibly Indigenous, Australian, and what else? Maybe a little bit of Germanic as well. Like so, yeah, it's hard because there's many fragments that we're drawing from to get a historical reference, and it's really not emphasized in modern society, especially Western society, the importance of connecting with our ancestors and our tribe and our culture. Yeah, in a lot of traditional cultures, that was part of it, that was ingrained into the culture, and I think there's a reason why that was so. So, yeah, through our mythologies, we can connect with that. So, for me, what stands out the most would be the Norse mythology, the Proto-Germanic, and the Celtic, Irish mythology, because the Irish and the Scottish, the Gaelic language and mythology, is going to have resonance, even some of the Welsh. So for me, that's been something that I've really worked on studying and looking into, and really connecting with the different stories and the lessons, the parables within those stories, and the archetypes that are taught within the mythology. And mythology is really fascinating. I also love reading Greek mythology because it's so colourful. Greek mythology has got everything in it. It's, in terms of a drama, there's what would you say? There's every kind of scandalous thing going on within the Greek mythos. It's on par with the Bible. Which I also see as a type of mythology, especially the Old Testament. If you read it from a mythological standpoint, not a doctrine or a dogma, but looking at it as a mythology and how it's fragments of older mythologies going back to Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt and stuff like this. So yeah, this is really important for us to first primarily look at our ancestral mythology, which would be in terms of our blood codes, the connection with who we are. And I delved pretty deep into the Norse mythos over the last few years because I saw that as quite an integral thing to study. And like the Greek, it's absolutely fascinating. There's some wonderful characters, beautiful stories, and there's actually a lot of parallels between the Greek mythology and the Norse. So first I went back to the beginning. So I looked at the creation story of the Norse mythos, which is a great story. It's wonderful. You've got the two primordial worlds emerging out of the void, which is Gunungagap, which is this unmanifest. So the void is different to the abyss. I'll just clarify that. Others have been speaking about this lately too. The void is almost like the womb where creation sprung. The abyss is almost like the antithesis of that. So you've got Gunungagap, which is like this womb-like primordial void, and out came the land of fire, Muspelheim, and the land of ice, Niflheim. And from those two primordial worlds, especially Niflheim, the land of ice, which is the water, sprung some beings. The first being was Ymir. Ymir was a giant, so he was a frost giant because he came from the ice, but he actually came from the blackened poison ice of the well, and I may mispronounce this one, of Heilgevermir. My Norse pronunciation is terrible, so don't quote me on that. But this is a toxic poison well that, for some reason, is infected with this evil energy. And that's where Ymir comes from, and he's a very chaotic giant, almost reminiscent of how you have the Titans in the Greek mythology. You have the Jotun in the Norse. So there's two parallels there with the giants. And then out of a block of ice, a primordial cow called Arumbala, once again pronunciation could be wrong, licks this ice, and this ice is pure, so it's the clean ice, not the blackened ice. And out of this comes Buri, I think it is, who is the grandfather of Odin. And somehow he has children, manifests a wife out of somewhere. A lot of these mythologies, it's not cut and dry with how things work. But anyway, he ends up with 3 grandsons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. And somehow they end up living in Asgard, which is the top of the Yggdrasil, which is the world tree that is springing out of the primordial Ginnungagap. So yeah, first comes the Yggdrasil, then comes Muspelheim and Niflheim, I think. So I'm still piecing all of this together myself, right? So then Ymir is found to be quite destructive and chaotic, and he's causing problems on the Yggdrasil. And Odin and his brothers decide that they need to rid the Yggdrasil of Ymir. So they kill him. And yeah, because they kill him, they create Midgard, which is Earth, which is this realm here, out of his body. So they say, his bones become trees, or his, fingernails become trees, or whatever it is. His body parts become, his blood becomes the ocean, parts of the earth. And because they have this realm, that they create a bridge from Asgard to Midgard, made of a rainbow. And this bridge is called the Bifrost. So this is kind of that bridge between the upper and the lower worlds. In Sanskrit, they call it the Lokas, the higher worlds, and the Tala, which is the lower or the level worlds, which is probably more like Earth, the Lokas, and the realms below here. So everything converges here in Midgard. That's what has to be emphasized with this story, that there is that bridging between the upper and the lower worlds through Midgard, because Midgard is made from the primordial worlds of Muspelheim and Niflheim, Ymir, and then Odin coming from Asgard, creating the earth. And then humanity are forged from true trees, the elm and the ash tree and the elm tree. So you have Ask and Embla are the two first humans that I think Odin and his brothers create through tree magic out of a tree. So yeah, this is also fascinating because in the biblical reference it's more that Adam is made out of the dust of the earth or something like this. In the Norse it's very much connected around the tree law, the universal tree. We are made from the tree, and the Yggdrasil itself is actually an ash tree. So is, I think it's the first man, Ashk, is also an ash tree. So man is the Yggdrasil in a sense. So this is what happens, and then somehow there's 9 worlds, they all manifest. you have Asgard, which we just mentioned, and then you have Vanaheim. And Vanaheim is the land of the old gods. They're almost like the nature gods. My dog's decided to play ball in the background, so pardon the noise. The Vanir gods, they're more elemental in a way. This is what I feel. And you've got the brother and sister, Freya and Froya, which Froya, the masculine, he becomes the king of another world called Alfheim. And Alfheim is where the light elves are from. And all you have to do is look at something like Tolkien and how much Tolkien got information about the elves. If I throw this ball from my dog, she'll be quiet. Get it? In terms of Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, and all that information on elven lore and who the elves were and stuff like that. And they say, that a lot of us actually hold Alfarian genetics. And you could look at the Irish mythology and the Tuatha Dé Danann, and there's a connection there as well. But the Vanir king, he the son of Njord, and Njord, who's the father of Freya and Froya, is the sea god. So he's connected to, or similar to, say, Neptune in the Roman Greek mythology, or Poseidon. So you've got them, and you've got Alfheim, and then you've got Nidvalir, or Svartalfheim, which is where the dwarves and the dark elves live. Now, the dwarves in the mythos are always crafting things. They're crafting different interesting tools for the Aesir gods, especially to work with. Sometimes they make Gleipnir, which is this magical lead that they can bind the wolf Fenrir with, or they, I think they made even Odin's, or Thor's hammer maybe, Monir. I have to go back through it, but it's usually the dwarves that are responsible for making all the technology. So you could look at the parallels between technological advancement and where's that coming from in terms of realms, AI, and in terms of the Svartalfar. This could be, connected to that kind of inverse reality of the AI. And you could say that these dark elves, these Svartalfar, were infected from the same well that is in Niflheim, the poison well. And also, while we're at the poison well again, there is a dragon there, a shadow dragon called Nigoga, who drinks from the poison well. And I think I've mentioned him in another video when I was talking about my dragon dreaming, and how, he is drinking from the poison well and gnawing on the roots of the Yggdrasil. So he's kind of slowly destroying the world tree. But the world tree is quite resilient and is able to cope with his gnawing on that root. But it is causing an issue that is probably leading to that infection. And in a sense, in the other video I was talking about the abyss, the sealing off the abyss, that rift to the abyss that I've been shown. And maybe this is the first tear in terms of Nigoga and what he was doing. So you've got that, the poison well. The other wells, you've got another well in Jotunheim, which is the land of the giants, the Jotun. So those other giants, not just Ymir. Don't know how they all were created, but they were. Also in Muspelheim, you've got the fire giants, Surtur, who is in the Ragnarok. But we'll go back to him. We're talking about Ymir, the giant of wisdom, who sits at the well of Mimir's Burr. Once again, didn't pronounce that right. You can look these up and get the proper Norse pronunciations. That's not my talent. This is just off the top of my head right now. I just thought it would be important to talk about this right now. So you've got Mimir, and he guards the well of wisdom. And this is where that archetypal story of Odin sacrificing himself onto himself to attain the knowledge of the runes comes in, where he goes to Mimir and he asks for this wisdom and knowledge. And Mimir says there's a sacrifice you must make, and first he gives his eye. He gives one eye, and this is why, in a sense, he has two ravens that watch the 9 worlds for him, because he lost one eye, so he has his eyes as Hugin and Muggin, the two ravens. But this was not enough. He still wanted more wisdom. So to go back, he plunged himself onto his spear and hung himself upside down on the Yggdrasil to attain this knowledge of the runes. He did this for 9 days and 9 nights. So once again, you've got that 9 in there, 9 worlds, 9-day sacrifice. And he comes out of it with all this great knowledge. The knowledge of Galder, the knowledge of the runes. So yeah, this is just some of it, hey, in terms of the creation story and the 9 worlds. Yeah, it's fascinating. Going back to Surtur, he somehow crosses the Rainbow Bridge, which is guarded by Heimdall. Heimdall is another Aesir god who is always looking out over the bridge, guarding it. He has a horn, and yeah, he's a pretty cool character. I really like Heimdall. But yeah, I think things start to go a bit of astray because of Loki. You've got Loki, this trickster archetype that is throughout the mythos, and he's supposed to be like a brother to Odin, but he's half Jotun and he's half Aesir, I think. So he kind of has some of that poison in him from the poison well that the Jotun hold, possibly. And Loki starts off just being mischievous and careless, but as time goes on, he really begins to betray the gods and cause a lot of problems. And that eventuates in the Ragnarok, where Loki and Surtur, the fire giant, and his army cross into Asgard. You've got Jormungandr, which is the world serpent, which is one of the beast childs of Loki, because Loki fathers many beasts. And Jormungandr is also like an Ouroboros, which is really interesting that we have this Ouroboros, the serpent eating his own tail, surrounding Midgard, the earth. In terms of the occult, there's a lot to that, that is in the mythos. And when you look at how the Ouroboros is kind of documented through Hermeticism and many different occult lineages, and you understand being in time, infinity, the infinity loop and the Ouroboros are connected, the Lemniscate as well. So being in time, in infinity, is actually kind of being trapped in the cycles of samsara, in a sense. So yeah, you've got that. And yeah, so you've got Jormungandr, you've got Fenrir, the wolf that they bound, the gods, the Aesir gods bound because they were fearful of his sheer power. He had this ferociousness and great power. He was another beast, son of Loki and Angrboda, I think it was, one of the giantesses. For some reason they gave birth to all these beasts. So yeah, he was bound, and because of his binding, he resented the gods, and he contributed to the Ragnarok, and I think he subsequently killed Odin. I could be wrong there, I'd have to go back and read the Ragnarok, but he is a big part of the destruction because of the way the gods feared his ferociousness. That turned him. And that was to do with the old god Tyr, or Tiwaz, who was actually a rune. If you study the runes, you have the arrow rune pointing up, the sky father, Tiwaz. And there's not a lot of mythology about him, but he is a very old god. I think he goes back quite far in history. But Tyr was the only one with the courage to bind Fenrir. And they got a special rope from the dwarves, Gleipnir, that was made out of all these very rare exotic things. And Fenrir made the deal with them that he would only allow Tyr to bind him if he could put his hand, if Tyr put his hand in Fenrir's mouth. And of course, Tyr was willing to sacrifice something as well, so he actually ended up sacrificing his hand to bind Fenrir, but this didn't work out very good for the gods, for the Aesir. So you've got these beast characters, you know, that are within the mythos. Loki also gives birth as a mare to Sleipnir, which is Odin's eight-legged horse, who's a little bit more of a benevolent character in the mythos. But that's a funny story in itself, because here's Odin, you know, and he didn't have Sleipnir before. He'd just journey around, and he got Sleipnir from Loki, but due to Loki's misfortunate practices. So Loki made some dodgy deal. He was always making dodgy deals with one of the giants, who was a master builder, about building a fence around Asgard, building a wall. And he said, if you can build this wall in this amount of time, I promise you the goddess Freya. And Freya, of course, is very beautiful, and this giant's like, cool, I'll do that. I'll build this wall if I get Freya. But he has to do it in a certain time frame, because Loki loves to make bets. And this giant has got this really strong stallion. Can't remember his name, but he's a very robust, strong stallion that helps him build the wall. I'm going to build a wall. And I wonder how that went. Yeah, it gets a bit messy, because Freya finds out what Loki's done, that she's been promised to this freaking giant for this wall, and she's like, you've got to do something about this, Loki. I'm not going off with this giant. So Loki realizes the mess he's created, and he has to go and make amends. So he plans to sabotage the giant from building the wall by distracting the giant's horse, who's helping him. And what he does is he shapeshifts, because he can do that, into a beautiful mare, and seduces the giant's horse. And they end up making love, and Loki becomes pregnant and gives birth to Sleipnir. Very bizarre. There's also Hel, the goddess. Whether she's Loki's daughter or not, this is debatable. But she goes to Hel, which is another world where people go when they die. So in the Norse mythos, Hel isn't a place of fire and damnation. Hel, which has been misappropriated, I think, by Abrahamic religion, was actually a place that you went to heal. You look at the word Hel, healing, hello, you know, hello, you're going to heal in hell. So anyone that was not a warrior, that did not die in battle and went to Valhalla, would go to hell. That's why in the Norse Viking lore, you know, so many people were so keen to die with honor on the battlefield, because they didn't want to go back and heal. They wanted to go and be with Odin in the halls of Valhalla, and then be his army for the Ragnarok. So yeah, you've got this whole paradigm there where, you know, Hell is looked at as this horrible place in the modern paradigm, but it's actually a place of healing. And even look at Finland, you've got Helsinki, so there's many etymological connections. And if you look at the Bok saga, you can see some really interesting parallels with that as well. The Great North, Hell, all of that. So yeah, that's a little bit of a rundown of some of the mythology. It's so dense. If you have a Norse background especially, I really recommend looking at it. And also studying the runes. The runes are really amazing, and they tie in with the mythos. I drew a picture of the Yggdrasil, and through that process I learned a lot about it. Bless you, doggy. My doggy's sneezing. You want to say hi? Say hello? Hello? Yeah, you're a good girl. Anyway, I'm getting distracted by my dog. That's, yeah, a little bit about the mythos from the paradigm of the Norse. But if you're Irish, you know, the Irish mythology is very fascinating as well. You know, gods like Lu, and I'm not as well versed on that. It's definitely something I've read about, but I find the names in the Irish very hard to remember. The Norse names just seem to stick in my mind a little bit better, so it's harder to like recall. But I do find the Arthurian legend very fascinating. And yeah, the whole thing with Avalon and the Lady of the Lake and Excalibur and all of that mythos is very resonant for me. And I also find the Greek really fascinating. And once again, going back to those parallels between the Norse and the Greek, you've got Idun in the Norse, who has the garden with the golden apples. And yeah, these golden apples actually bring immortality to the gods, so they have to eat these golden apples all the time. And then you've got in the Greek, I think it's Hesperides, and she has the golden apples as well. So there's parallels, like very much. Sorry, and then you look at the biblical story, you've got Eden, Idun, all of that. So there's a lot of connections and threads, and even the Vedic mythology is also interlinked with the Norse. There's a lot of parallels, especially with archetypes: Shiva, Odin, Indra, and Thor, and yeah, all these different characters. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to study all of them. Also, going back to more animistic mythologies, because they can also teach us a lot. I love the Indigenous Dreamtime stories as well. They're a lot more, I find, sweet, and very much animistic, and beautiful, beautiful stories, beautiful lessons within those stories. Yeah, but all of them are important, and I think it's a really beautiful way to honour our ancestors, past, present, and future, and teach this to your children. Connect with this with your family. You can have dinner conversations about this stuff. Teach people, because they've forgotten. And for some people, it's really hard to comprehend the mythos. They find it really alienating and overwhelming. But there's some great videos on YouTube with people telling the story. There's some amazing books out there. I just really encourage you guys to all connect with it, because it's a beautiful thing. And through that, you'll get inspired in ways you couldn't imagine. Or you'll just begin to understand that these gods, these stories are extensions of human consciousness. They're archetypal aspects that we can all connect with, especially at certain phases and stages of our life. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's enough of a ramble about mythology. Apologies if I did mispronounce